So Laura and we met, I'm going to say maybe 8 months ago. It feels like I've known you my whole life, right? But we
Don't
met.
know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, Miles.
It's a good thing. We met at a swanky networking event in the centre of Mayfair. We literally met at the bar, struck up a conversation, and from then on we've been like digital friends. We have obviously met up since, but I asked Laura if she'd like to come on the show, and she said yes. She's a really interesting character. For any of you that know her out there, you will already know, and for those of you that haven't met Laura already, you're in for a treat. You're absolutely in for a treat. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro, a little bio for you, Laura. So your background is really sort of corporate, high-level jobs, senior level positions, five-star hotels, hospitality businesses. However, there is a sort of what's the word? There is a sad part to your story, I suppose, Laura. Your life imploded, I think is how you describe it, in 2015. I won't steal your thunder there. You can explain to people what happened to you. But what I love about you is that, you know, you pulled yourself back up from something that a lot of people don't pull themselves back up from. And so much so that you've done a TED Talk.
I have done a TED Talk.
So you can, I could see people like beavering away, clapping in, Laura Toop, TED Talk. Don't watch that right now.
That's my very serious side, that version.
Yeah, so watch that later on, and at least then you'll have some context. So Laura, I know you're going to do like a formal introduction, but why don't we just start off with something mischievous? Why don't you tell people a little something that nobody knows about you, or very few people know about you?
Well, we've joked about this one before, and I don't know why it came up, but it's the thing that's going to instantly come to my head now, is that I am featured in medical textbooks. Back when medical textbooks were still a thing, they're probably all online now. Because when I was very, very young, I had a very rare ulcer that saw my tongue come away from the bottom of my mouth, which is amazing. It's, you know, so the consultant was so thrilled he had to take pictures. I mean, I'm not sure they necessarily noticed it was my mouth now, but there we go. So, hey, I think you were the first person I shared that with, because for some reason it just
now you've shared it. Now you've shared it with the world, and I'm sure after people Google your TED Talk, they are going to Google said ulcer and see if they can make your mouth go viral.
Well, let's just leave it there.
let's definitely leave it there. So I think I should have said at the beginning of the show, this is probably not going to be PG rated. This is probably rated 15 or parental guidance. We're not going to hold back when it comes to subjects we talk about, and maybe the language that we use. If you have any questions at all for Laura, and I need to just be serious, I think, Laura, before you start. What I do know about the work that you do as a leadership coach is I suppose it's sensitive to the viewers and listeners or your clients. So there shouldn't be, but there still is a decent amount of sort of stigma around certainly people in senior positions within business reaching out for help. I think they feel like, you know, they've failed if they need to ask for help or to use a coach. For the record, I don't feel there's anything at all to, you know, all of the greatest athletes in the world all have coaches. So why don't we sort of accept that within business? So what I do want to say is that if you feel like you don't want to put a comment in the chat for fear of embarrassment, if you like, then please do get in touch directly with Laura. Her email is on the screen. Everything that you talk about with her is, of course, in the deepest of confidences. And if you feel like any of what we talk about today strikes a chord, then please just reach out directly. Don't feel like the only way to engage, if you like, is through social media and airing your washing in public if that's not what you want to do. If you do want to pop a question though in there, a general question, then please do. I'll be keeping an eye on those for you, Laura. I think I should just pass things over to you. Why don't you give people the sort of the detailed version, or no, I shouldn't say detailed review, because I do know that Laura Longletter, she does like to talk. So we've only got 5 hours today for this live stream. We might not fit it all in. Come on.
Occasionally I can be succinct when I try really, really, really hard, Miles. I know, I've got to try really hard.
Go on, let's go for it.
So yeah, like you said, my background really is in corporate change and transformation from all manner of industries, brands, from the entertainment industry to, as you said, 5-star hotels, to hospitality, even bras and knickers at one point in my career. But that's a whole other thing.
That's another webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, life was really good. I worked really hard. Now I progressed my career. I was in a senior leadership position, and then life happened. And my husband was diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer, and from diagnosis to dying was 11 months. And then set in place sort of effectively a chain reaction, I guess, for want of a better way of describing it, where I then subsequently lost my health and ultimately lost my career. And so at the end of 2015, I was in a position where even took my then 4-year-old nephew to turn around to me and say, Auntie Lollipops, which is what they call me, now that Uncle Chris is dead, you have nothing. So there I was at the start of 2016 with my 4-year-old nephew, telling me it very plainly as it was that I had nothing. And so if you have listened to my TED Talk, you will know that my mother's solution to all of these problems was I was to go back to ballet and do something like that.
You've got to love a mum.
Absolutely, practical advice as ever. And the thing is that there actually wasn't the kind of advice out there that I wanted. And anyway, I got tired of everybody telling me what I needed to do. So I decided to fly myself off 5,000 miles away to sit on the beautiful island of Aruba, where, other than doing nothing for the holiday brochures, I began to put the pieces of my life back together again. And so on that beach, Project Me, as I affectionately call it, was born. So then roll forward to today, my life is a very different life. I have moved 90 miles around in 25, bought a house in a town I didn't know, renovated that house and made it into a home, made new friends, and set up a business, having retrained. So ultimately, through Project Me, I'm living Project Me, but I've also rebalanced, rebuilt, and reignited my life to become the leader of my life rather than getting lost and stuck within it. And so that is really the work I now do with others, hopefully, so they don't end up having to be, where literally it becomes this chain reaction and they lose everything, because you can't differentiate between your professional life and your personal life, because there's only one of you. There's only so much that you can deal with.
Laura, well, I think a lot of people listening to this will be shocked, I suppose, at how you're able to talk about, your husband's death, and how, I don't know if upbeat is the wrong sort of word, but what I found amazing, I suppose, about you is how I can imagine it was a really dark time around 2016, 2017, but you know, you've really worked on yourself properly, and I can really see how you can project this onto others, because you know, if you can go through that and be this bubbly personality, and you know, just being able to talk about it. I mean, my
Yeah.
father died 15 years ago, and my mother wouldn't be able to talk about it. Certainly not, you know, with others like live on the internet, right? So,
Yeah.
so yeah, Project Me. I mean, I suppose Aruba,
Yeah.
that must do things for everybody, right? But
Well, I can't say that, you know, it is known by its locals as the Happy Island. I'm not sure that was resonating when I first got off the plane. But I think that, you know, yes, and I suppose I have done a lot of work on myself, and that is very, very true. I think it's a lifetime's of work, if I'm brutally honest, and because I haven't always known how to deal with it. So I think
yeah, Laura, so I'm going to jump in and say that we've spoken about the sort of the deeper parts of your life and your early life, and you know, it wasn't a sort of it wasn't a great start, right? I mean, you were very poorly as a young child.
Yeah, and I suppose from then it was, back then I didn't have. When I was 13, I had a water skiing accident. I went to bed for 2 years because I gradually lost my mobility, and so therefore, you know, getting up to go to school at a time when there wasn't a mobile phone, there wasn't social media, so consultants couldn't see what was wrong. So problem number one, I had parents who were very protective, so problem, if you want to call it, number two. And third, I wasn't in school and socially connected, so I took control of the only thing I could do, which was food. So roll forward 2 years, and I ultimately did have bilateral hip and back surgery at 15 and learned to walk again. But by which stage the eating disorder had become much more problematic and had become the bigger of the two problems. Don't get me wrong, I went off to university, got a first class degree from Leeds and all the rest of it, but the eating disorder part was just bubbling away under the surface. And ultimately what happened was that became so big, I then collapsed and had to deal with that problem, because I had just kept feeling that if I kept pushing harder, trying to do more, control more, it would, you know, be fine. I'd get there. It's not fine. It doesn't, you don't get out the other side without doing work. But then I didn't really have the words. So for me, very much back then, it was about what I call something now, self-expression beyond words. So it was dance, but I was 22 at that stage. It was dance, it was music, it was art, all forms of self-expression that, you know, got me through to the other side to overcome an eating disorder.
I mean, well, you definitely need to write a book. I mean, but in terms of sort of professionals and leaders watching this, I think what that little synopsis, and you just touched on just some of the things that have happened in your life. I think they can be reassured that you know, there is hope, and I mean, there aren't many things that you haven't dealt with, either personally or professionally, that you're not able to sort of coach people to overcome. And I think you know, around this, it's modern times, isn't it? Because we are sort of groomed really to try and portray this image of perfection, you know, only post your best pictures on social media and using filters and only posting about positive stuff. And you know, we do get a warped sort of
oh, absolutely. Well, because the education system sets us up for that. You know, we go to school at the moment, and there aren't many schools that take a coaching approach, but most schools, you go in and the teacher stands there, and if you follow the rules and the leader, you'll get to the top of the glass, you'll get a gold star, and success will be yours. And so we were ingrained from a very early age that there is a set of rules to which we need to follow. So therefore, there is a wrong and a right, and success looks a certain way.
Do you know what? This is funny you said that. This hasn't been rehearsed, but I was talking about this the other day, and the school system, it sort of teaches you that there's only one way to solve a problem, and if you sit the exam and you don't get it right, then you're a failure and you're wrong. And life isn't like that, and business isn't like that, and there's many ways to skin a cat. And I think we definitely need to think differently about how we coach and train young people to be resourceful and imaginative when it comes to tackling life, right? Because
absolutely,
bloody hell, it's hard. Okay, so you deal with leaders day in, day out.
Yeah.
Maybe you can sort of give us a typical example. I mean, like, there's no need to name names, but give an example of like some of perhaps the issues some people come to you with.
Yeah, sure.
In a loose way, how you've coached them through it, and then what's been the outcome.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, I suppose typically clients come to me for three different things, for want of a better way of describing them. It's because either a situation has happened to them or they've experienced something. So whether it is the loss of somebody, or they're being bullied, or they're experiencing burnout, or it's about their emotions, they're not managing their overwhelm, they feel extremely anxious, frustrated, exhausted, or a behavior. So they've noticed that the stress is leading them to drink more than they've ever noticed before, or they've just got this absolute fear of going into the office because of having a panic attack, to literally they just feel on edge the whole time and just unable to make decisions. It will be one of those three things that they come to me and say, Laura, can we have a conversation? And we then go from there, really. So I mean, the clients I work with have come from all manner of industries. I think the commonality is that they are senior leaders who are, have got extremely, high profile jobs with a lot of expectation placed on them. They've got teams beneath them. There isn't necessarily the support infrastructure within the business or they readily have access to. And they're in a place where they're feeling quite isolated, quite exposed, and their world is because they're going in trying to be everything to everyone and it's not happening. So, I mean, to give you some kind of real life examples, as it were, and no, I won't be naming names, and I have changed a couple of things purely to keep the anonymity, but that's in terms of the precise nature of the role, as opposed to actually what we did together, I hasten to add. So take Hannah, for example. Ultimately, hers was a situation. She was head of operations in her business. The pressure on her to manage multiple complex projects and teams, you can imagine, just intense. However, the unexpected death of her beloved brother in a foreign country had really shaken her world. She'd been somewhat removed from the rest of her family. Her brother had been her real rock. And she had really found herself in this place of, I'm trying to manage all of this face on, but I leave the office doors and there I am. I just feel totally overwhelmed. I feel completely exhausted, really fearful about everything now, and I can't seem to make any decisions that I would have gone really quickly before, and I just feel on it. She found herself Googling, am I going mad? And that was the point at which she reached out to me. And so, the way that we kind of worked was, first of all, we focused on where she was at now. We acknowledged where she was at, because one of the things that we're all so very good at doing. So we go straight to this place of, I've got a problem, what am I going to do about it? But if we don't really fully acknowledge what the problem is and where it's impacting us, we're not going to find the right solutions in order to take us forward. So working with Hannah, she and I really got to the grips with where she was at now, all the emotions that was going on, what that meant for her, and how she was feeling, to really then move on to, well, okay, so how did you want to feel? And so through the Project Me framework, we took slowly through these steps. And when I say slowly, this was over a matter of 3 sessions, to a place where she was really clear that she'd got a whole set of tools that would allow her to feel really strong, confident about where she was taking her next steps. She had clarity over what those steps would be, and a support framework within her social framework in order to be able to know that as she was building her strength back in the real world beyond the conversation between her and I, she was going to be able to do that. And so as a result, here she is now going, I've had some really difficult conversations that has allowed me to massively move on. I'm back in the position, feeling really confident, and I've got over this space, which might not have happened.
It sounds wonderful, Laura. Certainly when you were describing Hannah, there was lots of sort of like things that resonated with me. And I think, I say we all, a sweeping statement, but it's very common to suffer from like this imposter syndrome when things are sort of getting on top of you. And a lot of the time when you reflect back, actually people aren't looking at you so closely, as it were, as you think they are, because everyone's just so busy thinking about themselves. But I think what's the key here about leadership training is it's very much about the person behind the leader. As much as we like to think that we're all individual and we're all different, as human beings, we all generally behave and react very similarly to different circumstances. And it sounds like the person, Hannah, was really able to and quite capable of dealing with it, but just didn't know where to start, right? And that's, I think, the beauty of working with someone like yourself.
Absolutely, and that invariably is the starting problem, if you want to call it that. Is that, I often describe it to clients as your head is basically stuck in a washing machine on a mega spin cycle. The washing is going round and round and round. You can't see whether it's undies or socks you're looking at, and you just need to be able to have somebody turn, because you can't even find the button, so you've got to have somebody to turn the button off for you so that you can actually look at what's in front of you to be able to deal with it, because it ain't going to get better by doing it on your own. And I think, look, don't get me wrong, I value the importance of talking. As you joked earlier on, I am Laura Long Letter. That is a nickname I have been given in the past. And I value talking, but there becomes a point where talking has to be followed up with some level of action. Otherwise, you remain stuck. And I think that, through what I've learned through my own journey with Project Me and the work I do with clients, is the sort of 3 A's. And that is the importance of acknowledging, which is, understanding where you are now, to then having associated actions. So the second A is to act, in order to be able to be clear about the actions and the way they relate to what matters most to you in this moment. To then, okay, so you've got started, so that's your motivation. You've got clarity, you've got focus, you've got motivation. But then when you go to the third A, attain, that's your momentum, because we can all get started on something. It's that classic, it's the new year, we're going on a diet, and 2 weeks in, it's all out the window and we haven't done it. And momentum is the hardest thing. So again, that's where I work to be able to ensure clients have the appropriate tools for them. So this is very, very bespoke, so the tools I would suggest for client A would be very different for client B, because it depends what matters most to them in that very moment and the person that they are. Because back to your point, the commonality within all of this is ourselves. So unless we are firmly grounded in ourselves, then everything else is just part of the washing spinning up on around us.
I think obviously I don't know what you're talking about, a washing machine. How does that work? But like what does resonate with me is the whole use of a coach, and whether it's for trying to get better at a sport, which is where we normally associate coaches, but having, when you think about it logically, why wouldn't you have a business coach, right? A leadership coach, someone that's there to keep you on track. I mean, just because you're the leader doesn't mean that you have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, right? The majority of us would lean on our partners at home to help us out with our, weekly tasks and all that kind of stuff. So there's no, I don't want to use the word shame, but there's no, you're not less of a person if you have a leadership coach. Actually, this makes you more of a leader, right? Because if we think we know everything, then that's the slippery road to perhaps knowing nothing. Yeah. What I like, Laura, is that you started talking there about the 3 A's, and I know that there's 3, 4, and 5. So maybe just touch a little bit on the fact that there is structure to what you do, because I think a lot of people think about a coach as, well, you rock up and you have a chat for an hour and that's it. Talk us a little bit more behind the structure of Project Me.
So just to respond to Irene's point in saying, what's the third A, please? The third A is attain, 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 which is all about momentum. So I think the thing is structure is important. So the challenge is that we don't realise until it's all gone, as it was in my case, actually how structured life is. Even if it's getting up to go to work, that's the structure. So if I haven't given any structure to the way I'm working, then there isn't any level of grounding that when we're not in the same room and in the same conversation together, they can go back to go, right, what am I thinking about? What is the 3 A's? And for me, it's 3 A's that have 6 baseline questions associated to them, that then produce 4 outcomes. And the outcomes are clarity, focus, motivation, and momentum. And so, there is an awful lot of talking in our sessions, especially right in the first session where we are, as I described with the example with Hannah, getting to grips with now, and I'm trying to get to the same place. But then I'm very clear about how I'm taking clients forward to get to a place when they are very clear about what their actions are now, the support framework they need, and they've got those tools to be able to do this beyond that. Because I don't want to, very clients do work with me at times because a lot of them go through challenging times, but ultimately the aim is that they have the tools themselves to be able to do this themselves without somebody constantly being there to support them.
I think you're touching on it again. It's about them sort of addressing the underlying issue that's blocking them, and so often it's a personal issue that is affecting their sort of work performance. I mean, certainly from my point of view, when I was working in corporate land, I was drinking far too much. But as far as I was concerned, I wasn't an alcoholic. I wasn't dependent on it. But if you go back and look at it now, I was wholly dependent on it. Yeah. And we're not going to unpack now my sort of issues there, but those issues did overflow into my professional life. It might not have ended up in an implosion, but it could have very easily done. And I think that if I'd had somebody at that time to really help me and coach me through it and understand what I was dealing with, which was obviously personal, that would have really helped in my professional life. Thanks for your questions there, Irene. Anyone else that's got any questions, please pop them in the chat. We'll keep an eye on them and we'll do our very best to answer them. So you covered off the 3 A's, then you covered off the 4 outcomes. Now I know that there's 5 C's. Now
there are 5 C's.
Before we talk about 5 C's, because I want to keep people, on tender hooks to understand what the 5 C's are. Why don't we? Do you have another example of a sort of a typical client like you just talked through with Hannah?
So let me think. So, I mean, I could give you the example of Alan. He was the guy who, was a sales director for a global digital business. And he was the guy who the alcohol intake was gradually creeping up. He was going to work feeling tired, lethargic. It wasn't the right space for him. He realised that he was getting more grumpy with kids. Every Sunday night, he was pacing the floor of his home office thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to... I've got to sit on a Teams call tomorrow in front of my team, and I've got to pretend I've got to put this big bravado on. And he just said, this can't be life. And he knew he could see his performance and effectiveness going down, and that was just eroding this spiral for him. And so for him, it was very much a case of, again, acknowledging where he was at and all of these emotions about where he was feeling and what was the expectation and who was this expectation coming from about what he needed to be and who he needed to be there for. And so for Alan, it was very much more a case of really getting back, you talked about it just then, it's really very much about getting back to the root cause, because fixing just the behavior. So, the reality is many an eating disorder doesn't get resolved properly because they never go back to source. You can't just go, it's an eating disorder, that's the outcome. That's what you see, but it's not the root cause. And this was exactly the same with Alan. The root cause was a whole series of life events for him that had happened, that had snowballed, that he'd never taken stock of as such, and had caught up with him, and he'd not made a shift in himself about what mattered most to him now. There's a great phrase that says, no man steps into the same river twice because it's not the same man and it's not the same river. Change that for women if you want to. And that's really true, because life changes us, but we try to believe, because it's easier for us and we're too busy to do anything else, that we're still the same person, that we haven't gained stuff from life, or we pick up habits and things like that, and we try to self-medicate using alcohol, drugs,
food,
gambling, food, shopping,
all of them,
and whatever you want to, even going to the gym. It's when it starts to become, what are you actually doing it for? Is there an underlying, I'm doing this because I want to avoid, I need to, deny something, whatever. But anyway, so slowly we worked together to really get to grips with the underlying root cause and put in things that brought real joy to him. He wanted to feel alive. I often ask questions, what do you want to feel? And people go, I don't know. This is a question you've never been asked. Equally, the question, who are you, also throws people as well.
Look, Laura, I was just going to jump in because this is something that really resonates with me. And it's the whole, when you get on an aeroplane, they ask
Yeah.
you to put your mask on first before you help others. But as a culture and society, we're shamed into like looking after ourselves. It's sort of like we're told that we need to look after everyone else and be kind to everyone else. And I think a lot of the times we neglect ourselves, and sort of charity begins at home and your well-being begins with you, right?
Absolutely. And I think the thing is so often some of these behaviors, like the alcohol eating disorders, comes because there's a disconnect between what society says, you know, um, is, you know, expected of you and what success looks like. And yet internally you're saying, but my success actually looks like this, like something over here. And so, not a great surprise, there's a disconnect, there's this gap that we don't know how to bridge. We haven't got the tools to bridge. And so we start self-medicating, or we start spending, we start shopping, we start eating, whatever. And it's the only way that gap is going to change is when we feel really grounded in who we are. And I don't mean that you are a mum, a sister, a dad, a brother. I mean, you know, at the very core essence of your personality, what are the things that matter most to you, that you want to feel? And it often stumps clients and go, I've never been asked that question.
I think it would stun
So,
the majority of our sort of listeners, and maybe that's like a little sort of personal challenge for them, if they get nothing else out of this.
What is their brand me is what I call it. It's their brand
what
me.
do you really want out of life? What sort of selfish, you know, be selfish about it. Identify something that you really want, and if you want it enough, then keep it at the focus of your goals, right, and go after it. Okay, so what was the outcome with Alan, wasn't it? I think we were talking about.
Yeah. So Alan ultimately realised that he didn't want to be in the core, you know, almost. I'm going to call it telesales, which is probably doing him a complete disservice.
But it's not his real name, and he won't know it's about him. Yeah.
where you know, it's constantly having, you know, when you've got a big sales team, you are going to have those who are like, you know, where's the new business come from? So he took a slightly different role, and we worked on what did that role look like. And it was very much going into still doing sales, but more, it was big businesses where it was all about relationships with big clients. So same but different, but we got that, and he's in a very, very different place, you know, because he's now doing something that is far more aligned with the person he is. So there isn't this disconnect. He's found his path, and he's quite happy with where he's got himself to, without making compromises on, say, salary, which is quite often something that people go, I can't have that because I'm not going to be earning as much.
Absolutely. And I think that, again, another good reason to have a coach to sort of mull these things over with, right? Because I think a lot of, I'm going to say us, people that have been senior managers within large companies, we perhaps we feel like we're not good enough to do other things. And especially if you've been in a company, in a corporate company, for maybe 5, 10, 15 years, you know, you've been sort of there all of your career. I can tell you from firsthand experience that moving perhaps to a large company that isn't quite as large as the one you work for, like, it can open up a whole world of possibilities and freedoms, and you get to understand how much equity you've learned over the years. I think just I'm stealing your thunder slightly, but my coach a few years ago, when I first went self-employed, she asked me to write a list of all of my achievements, because I was basically saying to her, like, I'm not good enough and all this sort of jazz. And like that list, I mean, I know I'm an old man, right? But that list across like 30 years of working was really bloody long, you know? And it was that realization, if you like, where, you know, society, it sort of says that you shouldn't feel proud of yourself and your achievements, and you shouldn't show off, and you shouldn't, you know, brag about all of your accomplishments, but it was a nice sort of thing to remind me. And if I'd known you back then, Laura,
absolutely. But I think we don't realise these things, though, Miles. We don't realise actually how much we're building. Look, the reality is that you know, as the story goes, the Project Me house renovation project, for example, for me, didn't quite exactly go to plan, because the builder told me he was bankrupt just as he gutted my entire house, and there was no back wall to it. So, slight challenge, but that's
life,
fine.
isn't it? That's life doesn't go to plan.
But I guess that's it. Life doesn't go to plan. But I guess the reason I say it now, and it's in light of what you're saying there, is the fact that I know absolutely zip about building. I now know an awful lot about building, but in that moment, what mattered most to me, so I was drawing back on Project Me for me, that in that moment, what mattered to me is that rather than run away to the hills and disappear completely, this guy came and told me and had a conversation with me. I still needed a house and he needed money. So we found a way to work. I became Project Me for my house. I then became the project manager for this house to deliver it, to be able to get it to work. I knew nothing, but what I did know how to do was to be able to pick up a phone, to be able to chase people, to have conversations with people, to seek to understand how I could make it all happen, to get back in a month of Sundays. Would I have expected to put that on my CV? No, but I drew on the skills that I had, and that was project management from a lifetime before. So people can't underestimate what we're capable of especially when somebody else can go. I mean, I worked with somebody recently who, he was like, I've not been working for all this time and I don't really have those skills, but I really want to do that. Literally within the space of one session together, he got to the end of the session going, I've been doing it all along. But you can't see yourself when you're in the picture. And that's the benefit of the coach. And I mean, if you've ever seen the Atul Gawande, who was very, very high ranking in the US, big cheese in the medical industry, he has done a TED talk about why everyone should have a coach. And he was absolutely adamant that no, didn't need anyone. He was this high ranking surgeon, and he just got an old fellow peer of his to come in. So just let me do it. And he just made some corrections and observations about what Atul was doing. And these observations improved his performance and the way he showed up in the world to such an extent. It's like, hence the TED talk. He is now absolutely preaching everyone should have a coach. Yet, of course, to your point, invariably they are only for sports. But no, leaders probably need them to be the very best they can be to lead a business.
And dare I say it, maybe they need more than one coach, right? And why wouldn't you you invest in you, because you are your business, right? It's fascinating. I reckon we could talk all day about this. I'm just gonna, I did promise we'd share what the 5 C's were. So why don't you share with us the 5 C's?
Yeah.
We've done the 3s, we've done the 4s. Tell us the 5s.
I'll tell you the 5s. So you've got communication and confidence, creativity and curiosity, connection and community, comedy and composition, and care and compassion of staff.
Lovely. Look, I was teasing you a little bit there, but what I really want to get across to the leaders that are watching this, I mean, we're on the biggest work social network, right? And people will be watching, and believe me, they do. And if they can take sort of one main thing from this, Laura's skills is not just in her training or in her life, but it's in the structure that's around Project Me that is able to work with everyone, regardless of what the root or roots causes of their block, if you like, at the moment. Look, Laura, why don't we just talk about how people can sort of engage with you? I know that you've got an ebook, which some people may find, because ultimately it takes a little while for people to sort of get some confidence in. I mean, I'd say,
Yeah.
if you haven't connected with Laura, then connect with her on LinkedIn as a starter, so you can start to see the sort of posts. But what about the other resources that are there?
Yeah, so to your point, I am active on LinkedIn. So if you're not connected with me or want to follow, just is it the bell that you have to press these days now? I think that's right. But just press follow. Or if you want to connect or send me a message directly, then absolutely fine. I am frequently on LinkedIn. So yes, please get in touch that way. Yes, there is the ebook which you can download, which is in my profile currently on LinkedIn. Alternatively, you go to my website, which is www.laura-toop.com, and you can just request it on the front page there. And what else I mean, if people would like to have, a clarity call, I'd be very happy to schedule in some time for that. So yeah, please drop me a direct message. If you've got questions on today that you don't want to share into this feed, I quite appreciate that. To be fair, usually I do get a lot of comments directly to me rather than in the public space. I'm used to posting out there for the benefit of everybody to read as opposed to comment on.
Yeah, it's not when I say like the secret commenters or the voyeurs. I don't mean that sort of derogatory towards people, but this is sort of, this can be sort of extremely personal and sensitive at times. So
No, totally.
I think that one of the important things that I would say about finding a coach is it's about finding a coach that's the right person to fit with you. There has to be a sort of a nice human connection there to get the most out of it. And I'm sure that Laura is the majority of people's cup of tea. But if you want to find out a little bit more, then take a screenshot. Laura's contact details there on screen, and of course you can connect with her on LinkedIn and stalk her. Right. Laura, is there anything you'd like to sort of leave us with? Any final thoughts?
No, I mean, I guess I think my view is that there is a project me in everyone. And it might not be right for now, but Project Me has been the grounding that has enabled my clients to keep going back when something has got a little bit tough, because they've got the tools to draw back on. So it's not something that you work and then you're going to have to come back because it's now not effective for something else that's come up. This is it is a framework. It's not a blueprint. I'm not going to explicitly tell you exactly what you have to do. That's very, very far from what this is. But that for me is what it's about, is to impart something that allows people to have a framework that they can keep drawing back on as they continue their journey.
Okay, well, thank you for that. If anyone's got any last questions, then please pop them in the chat. Irene's come back on and she's given us the accurate quote. In terms of no man ever steps in the same river twice. We'd have to update that these days because obviously we can't just use man.
I know.
That no person can ever step, I suppose, is the modern way of talking
exactly.
about it. But it's an old saying for sure. And Adam has come on and he said he thought it was a great session. I know Adam is in sales. And he will catch up later on. That's one of the nice things, Laura, about the LinkedIn Lives is that everyone in your network gets a little notification to say that we were live. And the majority of people don't watch us live. They can watch us on, you call it catch up, but you click on the link and it bursts into live. So, Irene, thank you so much indeed for coming on. We really do appreciate your interaction there. Laura, Valentine's Day. What a way to celebrate it. It's It's been absolutely perfect. I'm looking forward to us catching up again in a swanky bar in Mayfair very, very soon.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and you can project me. You can
Yeah,
project me.
absolutely.
Okay, Angela's just jumped on, says great session. Thank you, Angela, indeed, for coming on and watching and listening and taking part. Laura is fabulous. Please give her a follow. Please get in touch with her. Even if you're in two minds as to whether her services are right or wrong for you, she'd be happy to have a chat to you, I'm sure, even if you don't end up project me in with her. And the irony, Laura, is that Project Me is all about you, isn't it? Like it's not about
It's
you,
not about
Laura.
me.
Not about you. It's about everybody else. So
Exactly.
okay, well, I think that draws
Thank
February's
you.
guest slot to a close. Thank you very much indeed, Laura, and
Thank you, Miles.
we will sign off and say ta-ta for now. See you next time.
Thank you.